Hi, Chris.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, I just realized I've got my computer. Can I hear you? Yes, I can hear you now.
I'm just, you can hear me okay from the mic too. I have a lapel mic on, but.
Yep, no, that's great.
Okay, good.
So what time is it there?
It's 6 o'clock p.m. Sunday evening. So it's yesterday.
Have you got kids in the background?
Yeah, they're upstairs. They're 2 floors up, so we'll see what happens. Usually when they're that far away, it's pretty safe. But as you know, anything goes. You never know.
Exactly.
So.
And you know what? We're all used to that now.
Exactly. Yeah. I really I'd reflected a while back that I think the Zoom era has kind of introduced us to like seeing a little more of each other's humanity because we actually see these kind of imperfections, and it's kind of neat.
Yeah, and I do I was teaching in semester 1 at the start of the year when we went into lockdown, and that's what the students said. They got to see that we're real people.
Yeah.
They got to meet my kids when they were in lockdown and learning from home as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird time, and it's a beautiful day there, is it?
Yes. So it's still early in the morning, but yes, you can imagine
I don't know if I
if
want to
you
know.
were in Brisbane, it would be a very warm, beautiful day.
Oh, it's snowing here.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. I was in Canada in Banff for a conference last year. So I'm so glad that coronavirus only happened this year, so I didn't miss out on going to Banff.
Where were you? Vancouver?
In Banff.
Oh, Banff. Oh,
Banff.
That's beautiful. That's a nice spot for a conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I saw the conference was there, I thought that's a definite
one
to go.
Yeah. I used to do that too. I used to just kind of pick conferences based on the destination. That's
look,
like the
it
one.
Was the right conference as well, but the location definitely made me put the effort in to go.
Made it. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Was that the Fairmont there at the?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the big, the big beautiful.
Oh, no. It was at the Banff Convention Centre.
Oh, right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Very nice. Cool. Yeah.
Now,
so
Sophia should be getting on soon. She's going to moderate your session.
Okay.
I'm happy. Do you want me to keep an eye on the chat and flag anything if you've missed it, if there's any questions or comments, or?
Sure, yeah, that would be fine. So I'll kind of pause at different points. So I don't have a handout, but I'm going to ask people to open up like either a sheet or have a sheet of paper or something handy so they can jot down a few things at different points. So I can go back and forth when I ask questions to the chat. But yeah, if you see anything, that would be great. And I'll have to share my screen here too. I can probably, it looks like I can just
practice doing that.
Let me just check if I can do that. Yeah. Share screen. Looks like this is the one. Can you see that?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So I think we're good to go.
Good to go. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat, and if there's something direct that I can answer, I'm happy to just put a response in there, and obviously you can come back to that. Or if there's something that comes up that you've missed, I can keep an eye on and flag.
Okay, that sounds good. Is there, like, I'm looking at my video, are there weird lines going behind me with my video?
Just a little bit, but it's not too...
It's not distracting or anything?
No.
Okay.
That's what I often have to turn my light off in my office because it flickers.
Yeah.
It's,
hey.
Yeah.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi, Sophia. Is that a real background? Oh no, that's
no. That's our beautiful UQ. UQ is well known for its jacaranda trees.
Okay. I was gonna say I was jealous of all of you in Australia before, but if you're gonna sit outside while I do this and it's snowing outside here, I'm gonna be really jealous.
So we've done a check of sharing screen, Sophia, and we've done mic check, obviously, and everything's going well.
Thank you. Sorry, this morning I restarted my computer and I now can't access the shared drive.
Oh.
Yeah. So I had a bit of a freak out, but yeah, I think it's all good.
Okay. Well, let me know, let Amanda and I know if you need us to email anything through to you.
Yes, so Amanda's emailed, I contacted her and she's emailed some stuff through to me. So yeah, it'd be fine.
Perfect. And did you see my email this morning?
Just about whether we're excited.
Sorry, just about promoting the hashtag.
Oh yes, the hashtag, yes. Yes, I did, yeah.
Do you want me, I retweeted that we were on. I can retweet something if you want at some point too, but.
And Chris, you're happy for me. I might take some screenshots. You're happy for me to take screenshots and use.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Actually, if you'll just excuse me for 2 seconds, I'm just gonna run and make sure my dog is put away too. Actually, oh, never mind. It sounds like somebody got her. Good to go.
Marina, I might just check then that I can share my screen and it's not
Yep.
changing. Cool.
And Amanda, I see you're already on the tweeting. Yep, that's great.
And you can still just see PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect, cool, thank you.
Yes, Amanda, I think I already know who might win the best tweeter for the week.
Definitely Amanda. So I might just share my screen now, just so it's sitting there when we start. Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. We might get started now, just as it's 9 a.m. So welcome to the 2020 Faculty of Medicine HDR Week. To start off, we have Dr. Chris Cornthwaite joining us, who'll be talking to us about career building post PhD or RHD. So Dr. Cornthwaite holds a PhD in religious studies from the University of Toronto. His first non-academic work was in public policy, where he worked for a think tank and for the Government of Canada. So his work background includes running national projects on Indigenous reconciliation, Canadian economic competitiveness, and working on a team that helps other countries launch refugee programs. And he still consults in the refugee space. So he founded roostervein.com, which is a site dedicated to this topic in 2019 to give accessible and relatable career advice to students with advanced degrees. The site sees between 15 to 50,000 users a month, and its social channels reach 1.5 million monthly with career advice and inspiration. Just while I have you here as well, I'd like to encourage you all to use that hashtag UQMedHDR2020, and there will be a prize for the most active Twitter participator. So before we start as well, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet today. And on behalf of the Faculty of Medicine HDR Committee, I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. And we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So please also take some time to consider attending other programs during the week. We also have student presentations from 12 to 1:30 p.m. across the week. So I might now stop sharing my screen and let Dr. Chris Cornthwaite take it off.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen, so just give me 1 second to get going here. Oops, what did I do? Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can see that and that everybody can hear me okay. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. First of all, I'm sitting here in Ottawa, where it's kind of snowy and -2 degrees, I would say, Celsius. And I am wishing that I could be there with you all, not just because it would be great to be there in person, but also because the weather there sounds fantastic. And I made the mistake of doing a quick Google of what it looks like there as I was preparing for this talk, and quickly realized how gorgeous the scenery is there. So I hope you're all thankful for your beautiful sunny weather, and I'll try to be thankful here for my my snow on a kind of cold Ottawa cold Ottawa evening. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my story today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I've thought a lot about, and that is kind of around creating vision and doing some career planning with your PhD. If everyone has the chat open, would you just tell me right into the chat really quick, just so I can see where you're at. Write your degree program that you're in the chat, if you would. That would be really helpful. I might just get a wave of things, but are you all PhDs? Are you kind of a mixture? That's kind of helpful. Okay, PhD, MPhil. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So so it looks like there's a little bit of a mixture. So keep that chat ready, because I want to kind of do some things in the chat as we go. The other thing that I would ask you to do is maybe have either a pencil and a piece of paper ready, or else just kind of a digital note-taking thing. So I'm going to ask you throughout the talk, I'm going to ask you at different points to reflect and kind of take some notes on things. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. I want to start by telling you a little bit about my story first. And I did my PhD in religious studies, which I admit sometimes seems like a funny, it seems like a funny discipline compared to all the PhDs that I talk to around the world in all sorts of different fields. And religious studies is definitely one of the more rare ones. And it's definitely odd that somebody with a humanities degree is speaking to a group of medical students, for example, or I know you're in different kind of adjacent fields, but it's really interesting how much the more time I spend in higher ed and the more time I spend working with students, I see a lot of the same kind of themes. So I didn't really ever intend to become a career person who talked about who talked about careers. It was never in my wheelhouse. It was never on my radar. I really just started where a lot of people start at the end of my PhD, and I had a religious studies PhD, and I had no idea what to do with it, no idea where to go with it. I had sort of lived in blissful ignorance throughout most of my studies. And the last year of my PhD, I lived in Greece. It was fantastic. It was really just like the ultimate high of my academic career. And then I came crashing back down because I had nowhere to go after that. I had applied for postdocs, I had applied for academic jobs, and I didn't end up getting anything. So I had to kind of pick up the pieces, and I had to figure out how to actually create a career with this degree that I had. And frankly, I had no idea where to start. So you're all very lucky because you actually have this kind of week to talk and think about non-academic careers. The culture of my department where I came out of is we just didn't talk about life outside of academia. The people who left academia, I mean, they might as well have died as far as we were concerned. Not me personally, but as kind of the culture that I came from. So I really didn't have a sense of what you could actually do with a PhD outside of the academy. So I came home from Greece and I moved with my spouse and our 3 daughters into my parents' basement. And I would say that was probably one of the low points of my life, that having finished this huge culminative degree and done all this work, and all of a sudden I just had no future and nowhere to go. And I've realized that my story is similar to a lot of people's stories, actually, that a lot of people kind of seem to lack direction as they're nearing the end of their degree. And I moved to Ottawa, which is where I live now. It's the capital city of Canada. And I didn't really know it at the time, but that was a really good decision. So I moved to Ottawa and I started to network with everybody I could possibly network with, met everybody I could meet. I had an interview to be a realtor and sell houses at one point. I had an interview to be a landscaper and make like $17 an hour as a landscaper. Fortunately, those didn't end up being my calling. And as I networked more and more, and as I got to know more and more people, I eventually was offered. At first, it was just kind of a temporary job at a think tank. They desperately needed somebody to come and run projects. And I jumped into this think tank job, and all of a sudden I was running these national projects, and my projects were on the news in Canada, which is, kind of like Australia. It's not like it's the US news, but still we have our local kind of media. It's a smaller country, but it was still neat to see my projects on the nightly news and be meeting with people who were like making the decisions that would shape our country. And I went and worked for this think tank for a little while, and then they kind of made me full time. And then I went and I worked for the Canadian federal government. And I worked on a program, as kind of said in the intro, I worked on a program that helped other countries to launch refugee programs. And I actually did some work with Australia, not me personally, but well, it was me, but in the context of a team. My team worked a little bit with Australia because also you have your refugee sponsorship program. So Canada and Australia have done some collaboration there. So it was not really anything on my radar to do something on careers, but my department randomly asked me to come back and do a talk about careers, and I did it. And somebody asked me if I would write some things down online because there wasn't really that they knew of, and I since know of a lot more, but they didn't know of anything anywhere online that people could get advice about PhD careers. So I started this little blog called Rooster Vein. It's a super weird name. I probably would have picked a different name if I had to think it through, but I really didn't know it was gonna take off and kind of become my thing. So I started this blog, roostervein.com. Check it out if you've never seen it. Rooster is like, the opposite of a chicken, a rooster, and vein, V-A-N-E. So basically it's like a weather vane, but with a rooster on top. And I started writing career advice for PhDs primarily, but it's expanded a little more now. And it sort of just took off. I mean, I think it hit a nerve, and I think a lot of people were wanting to have these conversations about PhD careers, and it's kind of snowballed from there. And I still do some consulting and refugee work, but I do more and more of this kind of thing, like educating and talking about PhD careers. And the thing that I'm learning the most as I do this is, I mean, there are all sorts of things about the academy we could talk about. I'm not going to talk much about your specific degrees. I know you're going to hear from a lot of speakers throughout the week that are going to kind of help you to see some possible paths for your particular degrees. The thing that I want to encourage you with is that the thing that I see the most is that students of advanced degrees need to have a vision. We need to build visions. And I find so much that our generation, I don't know if you're all my age, I'm a millennial, maybe some of you are probably younger, I'm getting older and I forget sometimes, but the thing that I notice about my generation, even younger, is often we kind of stumble through life, and even in education, we often stumble through education without necessarily having a sense of direction. And sometimes this can be because if we're in higher ed, we're focused, some people, and I don't know what you're thinking, but some people are focused on kind of tenure track jobs to the exclusion of all else. And it stops us from actually developing visions. And one of the things that I realized when I stepped out of the academy and I started meeting PhDs who are doing the most like crazy cool things outside of academia and starting companies and like working on all sorts of international development stuff and being like experts, like testifying before parliament. And I started to see these people and the things they were doing, and it was just bonkers to me that there wasn't actually a connection between academia, that the life that I had in academia, that nobody actually knew about all of the amazing things that were happening outside. And the more that I do this work, the more that I just want to tell people, you can do almost anything with a PhD, almost anything. Like the sky's the limit. You can do so much with this degree. And I keep saying PhD, I'm sorry. I'll say MPhil too. You can do almost anything with an advanced degree. But if you don't have a vision, you probably won't. And that's the place that I'm seeing a lot of people at, is there's a lot of work you can do, and I'm going to do some of it today and talking about how to network and how to create a resume, and there's a lot of like nuts and bolts of job searching. But in my opinion, the bigger thing is actually learning how to create a vision that gets you excited about life, a vision that you want to get up in the morning and you want to chase it, and you want to go and take your unique skills and apply them to big problems. And if we look at the world around, I mean, I'm not much of a doomsday person, but 2020, if you weren't a doomsday kind of person, 2020 might have made you one, because there are so many problems in the world around that need to be fixed. And I don't even know you, but I know that you have, just by virtue of where you are, your program and your education, I know that you have a tremendous skill set that you can bring to do some really amazing things in the world. And that's kind of what I want to encourage you and I want to think through. So this is going to be a little bit more, this first hour is going to be a little bit more like maybe like humanities kind of focused, I would say. It's a little more of my kind of touchy-feely humanities stuff that I love to talk about. If you know me at all, you know that that's the kind of stuff I talk about all the time. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about some nuts and bolts in the second hour and do some networking and talk about networking specifically. And I'll take a break halfway through just to tell you, so I don't expect to sit for 2 hours. So you need to build a vision, and I've been thinking about through how to do this. And I think that the way that I like to think about careers is that you should start by thinking about your passion, your path, and your purpose. And that's really good alliteration. Passion, path, and purpose. I'm gonna like mess it up every time I try to say it now because it all starts with the same letter. So to actually start by creating vision, I want to read this quote by Jay Shetty. Some of you might know who he is. He says, "Your passion is for you. Your purpose is for others. Your passion makes you happy, but when you use your passion to make a difference in someone else's life, that's a service, that's a purpose, and that's the hand." I love that quote. Such a good quote. So your passion, your path, and your purpose. And I want to tell you why I think taking stock of these things can actually be a really good starting place for discovering a vision, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So passion, I can't even say it. Passion, path, and purpose. I should have chosen a different letter for my alliteration. That's a mistake. So first of all, the passion, as kind of was from the quote I just read, your passion is what you do for you. It's where you find meaning and joy in the things you do. And it could be in your work, of course. It could be just the things you do for play. Each of you already have things that you are passionate about. You already have things that you love doing. So your passion already exists, but it can evolve. And these things we do that are our passion, these are like the things that make us feel alive. It's the sweet stuff of life. And if I thought of Banksy, for example, hopefully you all know who Banksy is, the graffiti artist. Banksy, I would say his passion is probably painting, probably doing graffiti. If I was thinking of, I'm going to use 2 examples here throughout, so hopefully you can follow. I wish I could see a show of hands. Does anybody know who Emily Calandrelli is? Show of hands, anybody? Emily Calandrelli. So I have kids, and Emily Calandrelli hosts a show called Emily's Wonder Lab on Netflix, which is amazing. I'm assuming you probably have it on Netflix in Australia. We have it on Netflix in Canada. And Emily's Wonder Lab is a show about science, and she teaches kids about science. It's really great. It's a great show, especially for people who are thinking about science and science education. So her passion is talking about science. Banksy's passion is probably graffiti. Her passion is talking about science. Sorry. So your purpose is the meaning you place on the outcome of your work. So when you think about purpose, you think about not necessarily the work you like to do, but the outcome you like to have. Your purpose is connected to serving others. It's the big thing that you want to create in the world, the kind of waves that you want to make, the output of the work that you do. And just like your passion, your purpose already exists in you to some extent, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. So your purpose already exists to some extent. And by the way, I should say as an aside, when I talk about purpose, I'm not really talking about like a divine calling kind of religious thing. I mean, if you want to think that way, that's totally fine. I kind of just think about like the big things you want to accomplish in life, the things that you care about, the things that you want to commit yourself and your time and your efforts to. So purpose is the outcome of your work. So if I were to look again at Banksy, so Banksy's purpose, I mean, he's a graffiti artist, but the actual purpose of Banksy's work is maybe like political change or social critique or something. There's a much actually deeper purpose that in the work that he does. If I look at Emily Calandrelli, host of Emily's Wonder Lab, her purpose is teaching kids about science. So she makes it accessible. And even maybe to kids who may not have had that kind of access before. So all of a sudden she can bring science to everybody. So it's kind of STEM education. So in those two things, hopefully you can see kind of the division between your passion, which is the stuff you love to do, and the purpose, which as I'm defining it, is the outcome you want to have. Your path, your path is your career. It's the actions you take. It's the bridge between your passion and your purpose. And I'm going to get you to do some examples in a minute. So bear with me if this seems a little bit kind of fuzzy, but the path is where you actually do your work. As I said, it's the bridge between a path and passion and a purpose. And you can begin to articulate your passion and purpose right now. And we'll do that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But your path kind of takes some time. The actual way that you're going to go about bridging your passion and your purpose actually takes some time. It takes some work, takes some exploration, and it's really where the kind of career gets built. So Banksy's path is obviously spray painting graffiti murals. Emily Calandrelli's path was as a science educator in her career, and now she has a Netflix show. That's the path. So that brings the purpose, the passion and the purpose together. The path kind of becomes the way through it. And this is where I think the problem in how we think about careers lies. And hopefully, maybe you'll be the exception, but this is how I thought about careers. I thought, especially when I left the PhD, my goal was just to find any job that would have me. And sometimes that's the reality, because sometimes you just have to put food on the table. That was kind of where I was at. I was gonna be the realtor if I had to be. But a lot of times we don't necessarily think through our careers. We don't necessarily think beyond a path, and we just jump onto a career. And a lot of students just go on those, you kind of do a Google search for jobs and, oh, that one's open, that's kind of interesting. What job can I get? And when you're desperate, you just want a job. And sometimes you take the first job you can find. You're trying to figure out just who will have me. It doesn't necessarily matter who. And that dictates the path of your life. So a lot of people jump on a path without ever thinking about the passion or ever thinking about purpose. And these are the people, and I know when you're not sure where you're going, it's hard, especially when you need money. You really just want to jump on the path of least resistance, really. You just want to jump to where you can kind of get hired and get started. But I'd like to suggest in a lot of cases, and one of the reasons I started talking about not just careers, but I started talking about, excuse me, about careers with purpose, is because I realized that a lot of the people who jumped onto a path without really thinking it through wake up in their 40s and 50s, having kind of lived on autopilot. And it was true for me too, actually, that when I went and worked in public policy and I worked for the government, those were actually really great jobs, but they didn't actually necessarily connect either to my own passion or my own purpose. It was just about getting the first job I could get. And when I did refugee work, for example, refugee work is fantastic, meaningful work. But it was funny that when I came home at night after doing this fantastic refugee work, all I could think about was how to help students get better careers. And it's not to say that, like, obviously refugee work's not bad, it's really good work. But I knew that even if I wasn't doing that, somebody else would be doing that. And I felt that I had actually something unique to contribute to the career space. And that's why I wanted to go in that direction. So that purpose in that sense was kind of nagging at me, even though I had a path that I could have stayed on and stayed like a policy analyst. That question of purpose kind of nags at me. So I find this a lot, that when people get in jobs, and especially I find this a lot, I talk a lot to people with advanced degrees who have been in a role for 1, 2, 3 years. They've already left academia, they're already working, and they come back to this question of purpose. Like, okay, I've got a paycheck, I maybe got a pension, but like, what is this actually about? What is it that I want to accomplish with this career and with my labor? What kind of change do I want to see in the world? So I'd like to suggest to you that an actual better way to approach career planning is to put passion and purpose first, and then to figure out your path. And the reason why I think we can do this is that you can actually do this right now. And I'm going to lead you through some exercises to start thinking about this. So get your either pencil and paper or virtual typing device ready. So passion and purpose, they're things you already have. You already have passion and purpose in you. And if you kind of do some reflection and some inner work, you can use these to kind of start you off in mapping where you might like to go for a career. So let's talk about passion just for a minute. So the realities of your passion. So first of all, your passion is there. You already have a passion, and it might be science. Hopefully, if you're in a degree, some of the things you're doing, you're really passionate about, and you really enjoy doing them. You probably have passions on the side too. Some of you might love to bake. You might love painting. You might love, I don't know, there's surfing. There's probably surfing there. You might love surfing. So you probably have a lot of different passions. And all of those are things that are already inside you. And one of the things that a lot of people do when they want to figure out a path in life is they go kind of outward, and they'll go Google, like, how do you find your passion? How do you find a career you're passionate about? And really the answer to that question kind of starts within you. It's kind of doing some inner work to look at what you actually love to do and the kind of work that you love. Your passion, second of all, your passion is beautiful. Passion is a really beautiful thing. And psychologists talk about this thing called being in the state of flow. And when you get into work that you actually really love to do, and I'm not sure if you've ever felt this before, I'm guessing most people have at some point, you get into this flow state. And this is what we call being in the zone. Like, you get in the zone, and sometimes you just get so engrossed in what you're doing. This happens to me when I do video editing, believe it or not. It's super weird, but I like editing videos. And I get so engrossed in what I'm doing, and I don't even want to get up. I don't want to stop. I don't like want to eat. I don't want to sleep. I just want to like do the thing. And there's something that you already have that's like that. There's some kind of thing that you just get into it and you just can't get out of it. And it doesn't actually mean necessarily, coming back to finding your passion, just because you get in the zone doing one thing doesn't mean you're destined to do that for the rest of your life, but it does give you clues about the kind of things you love to do. So for example, if you really get in the zone when you paint and you love taking a blank canvas and creating something on it, you might also really love, inventing a new technology that's kind of a blank canvas too, and that you're creating something. So there are a lot of clues. And when we talk about it, and I'll ask you a question in a minute, but we come to this flow state. It's really a really special kind of magical thing psychologically, that we can just kind of disappear into this state. And it's really a place where our work really meets our happiness. It really is a fantastic place to be. And if you've ever been there and done that, you know what I'm talking about. Third, though, I want to say your passion evolves. So I'm using this as a starting point, kind of jumping off to help you think about career directions and building a vision. But your passion isn't some fixed in stone thing. And hopefully, just by getting an education, you're realizing this, that there's probably things you do now that you get immersed in, and that 10 years ago, you never thought that you would get immersed in like a clinical research trial or something. You never thought that you might get immersed in a public health campaign. But now the thing you get into and you can't stop doing it. So that's kind of the other point too, is that I want us to talk about passion as a starting point, but I don't want you to think it has to be an ending point, because your passion is always going to evolve. And as you try more things, as you take new roles, you're going to find new and different things that you're passionate about. So I want to ask you some questions, coming to a little bit of interactive session. So I'm going to say you can either put the answers You can write them down first. If you want to put them in the chat, if you're comfortable, you can. So I'm going to ask you these questions, and I'll give you like a minute to reflect on each one, okay? So if you have somewhere to write, let's start with this. So first of all, what do you spend your time thinking about? Write down like 2 or 3 different things that if you audit your brain activity over the course of the day, what is it that you spend your time thinking about? Even if you don't have to, you just kind of daydream about it. So go ahead and do that. I'll give you like a minute to do that. I can't see anybody. So give me like a thumbs up once you've written down a couple things. I'll just give you maybe 1 more minute to do that question. Somebody told me they're spending a lot of time thinking about what they can do next, which is totally understandable if you're trying to decide where to go next in your path. So, but maybe other than that, try to think about the types of things that you find yourself, or maybe even before you started having anxiety about a career, if that's where you are right now, what types of things did you enjoy thinking about? What kind of things did you spend a lot of time thinking about? Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question. Feel free to, by the way, if you want to take a screenshot or something, just feel free. I know it's going to be shared after, but these are good questions to kind of go away and think about too. So secondly, what type of work do you get so engrossed in that you forget to pee? This is, I didn't come up with this question. I've seen it in other places, but it's actually a really good clue to think about your flow. That's a bad metaphor now that I just asked about peeing, but when you think about the flow state that you get into, often that's the kind of place we get that we just can't think about anything else. So what type of work do you get so engrossed in that you forget to pee? So think about that one for a minute. Maybe write down a few answers. Yeah, feel free to put the answers in the chat too, if you're comfortable, either privately to me or to everybody, depending on what you're comfortable with. So somebody said that they get so engrossed in playing a musical instrument, which is awesome. I actually play musical instruments too, and I know exactly that feeling. And somebody else is talking about doing R, so doing some data analysis. Okay, I'll just give you 1 more minute. I hope this isn't too heavy conversation for a Monday morning. Okay, so question 3, what would I learn if I had the time and money? So if you could learn anything, you had all the time in the world, you had all the money in the world, it wasn't going to hold you back, what would you learn? Somebody said that they get so engrossed in creative writing that they forget to pee. I love that. That's awesome. It's neat. It's neat how often the kind of cross-disciplinary stuff can get us kind of out of our regular zone sometimes and getting us into kind of another mode of thinking or being. So that's really cool. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. So what would you learn if you had the time and money? Does anybody want to put an answer in the chat to what you'd learn if you had the time and money, just for fun? Throw that out for a minute. Somebody says more languages. Yeah, I love languages too. It's the same. I'd love to learn languages. Another person, languages. Languages. All right. Horticulture, that's awesome. That would be really interesting. How to play the cello, graphic design, love it. Okay, I'm just gonna, there's also just a question here. So I'm just going to write it down and it's about flow. I don't wanna lose it. Actually, maybe I'll just answer it right now. So I think, so somebody asked kind of privately, oh no, not privately, sorry. So somebody asked what happens when you lose your flow, when you're unable to achieve it, even for the things you love. And I think, I don't know if I have a simple answer for that. So the first thing I need to say is that sometimes if there are, like sometimes if you lose passion for things that you love, if there are like mental health kind of things connected to it, it's worth like talking to a professional. And obviously I'm not, so I'm not going to give out that kind of advice. But if there's something that you don't love, the things you used to love, I mean, that could be something to think about. I think also flow changes, flow evolves. And I think for me, what I find when I'm learning something new, I often will get into flow when I'm learning new things. So video editing is an interesting thing because it's so out of my league and comfort zone. But the reality is if I had to do it all day, every day, I would probably lose some of the flow for it. So it's interesting that actually tells me that part of the flow isn't just that I like to edit videos, it's that I like to learn new things creatively. And the flow in that case, I could probably start to capture it again by looking not at editing videos all day, every day, but at something new that I can learn that lets me create something. So I think it's important to realize, like, first of all, try lots of things to find things that you love to do and that you're passionate about. And this is where hobbies are a great clue. A lot of you put the things that you'd love to learn if you had the time and money. Most of you put down like a hobby. So that's really fantastic. So definitely that's a great place to start. And yeah, I think like passion evolves too. It's not just something that's fixed. As I said, it's always kind of evolving. So I think it's important as you go through your career planning, but also just as you go through your life, to kind of have this kind of internal dialogue and pay attention to the things that are bringing you joy, the things that you are really happy about. And you'll find even when you come to a workplace, you might love a workplace for a year or two. And then there comes a point where you're starting to lose the joy in it. And I see this all the time when I talk to people in careers. And you know, the job that they had 5 years ago was just amazing. And now 5 years later, it's kind of predictable and boring, and they're looking for something different. And that's just normal. I mean, that's just humanity. So it's important to kind of listen to yourself too, and listen to those cues that you're getting. So I want to move on to purpose and talk about purpose a little bit. I'm just checking the time here. Purpose. Okay. So let's talk about purpose. Realities of your purpose, just like passion, your purpose is there. So again, I said earlier, I'm not really thinking of purpose as being like big divine kind of thing. It can be if you want to be religious about it, but for the purposes, the way I think about it, it's just the things that matter to you. And you all, whoever you are, you already have things that matter to you. There are already things that you are passionate about. It's already there. So again, your purpose is not necessarily something you have to go out and look and Google like how to find your purpose, although you're welcome to do it if you want. But we already actually have things that drive us. We already have things that matter to us, and they are what they are. And whatever, so for you, if you look kind of inside, well, again, we'll do questions in a minute to kind of unearth some of it, but you might be really, you might consider your purpose to be like fighting global warming. You might consider your purpose to be curing a disease. You might consider your purpose to be educating a community about community health issues. You might consider your purpose to be caring for your family. I mean, there are different ways that we kind of conceptualize purpose. But if you stop and kind of look inside, you'll find that you already have a lot of things that are already sort of things that are purposeful that you are already thinking about. So purpose is there, and purpose is a really beautiful thing. And I already talked about the realities of my own sense of purpose, that I didn't really feel it as much in refugee work, and that I felt it when I started working with students. And I mean, there's no right or wrong. That's not right or wrong. It's just the way I am. And it was just something I cared about. And I think, to be honest, one of the reasons I resonated with working with students so much is, as you've heard my story, I had so much trouble coming out and I felt so alone when I was turning my degree into a career. So working with students in that way connected me to something. I knew what it felt like to be totally lost and not to know where to go next. And when I got to start working on that problem with Rooster Vein, it really made me come alive, and it really became something like what I would call purpose. So your purpose is there, your purpose is beautiful, but again, your purpose changes. So you might find as you go through life that the things you care about right now, I mean, maybe right now you're super passionate about, I don't know, cancer research or something, and you might wake up one day, 5, 10 years from now, and find that there's something completely different you want to do, something completely different you want to be a part of fixing. There's something else you want to kind of accomplish with your work. And that's totally fine too. I mean, it happens. We evolve, we're humans. And one of the beautiful things about how we operate is you'll wake up one day and you'll find that you care about something totally different that you didn't necessarily care as much about before. So I want to come back to these questions again. So get out your notepad or whatever if you have it. And I want to ask some questions to find your purpose. So what is the biggest problem that you would solve in the world if you could solve it? Biggest problem that you would solve in the world if you could solve it? Now, just to be clear, I don't care if you say climate change or if you say like small business development in my local town, whatever. There's no wrong answer here. This doesn't have to be like a huge global worldwide problem. What's the biggest problem that you see in the world that you would love to solve? Go ahead and write down your answer. I didn't say that. A couple of great answers coming in the chat. So personal indifference, apathy is one. Super, yeah, definitely important. Aging, another problem. Feel free to share your answers in the chat or just write them down if you prefer. That's fine too. Biggest problem you solve in the world. I always think when I hear this question, I think of Sarah Blakely. I don't know how many of you know about Sarah Blakely, but she founded Spanx. And if you go and ever like hear the story, she's so inspiring. She's just like the coolest entrepreneur, and she built $1 billion company. And there's this story about how she invented them. Basically, she like cut the legs or cut the feet off of a pair of pantyhose or something. And that's how she came up with this like $1 billion industry. And everybody around said to her, like, if it was such a good idea, somebody would already be doing it. Like, why does this make sense that you're doing this? And yet she had this vision. And it was the biggest problem she wanted to solve in the world. And it wasn't like she was necessarily trying to create world peace or something, but it was really just that she had chosen this was a problem to her that meant something to her. And she solved it. And she still she made $1 billion off of it. And it's really interesting when you actually stop and think through these problems, that if you go look at the people who've gotten rich solving big problems, often they're like really simple things, right? Like, how do you buy a book on the internet? Well, that's Amazon, you know? So the biggest problem you would solve in the world if you could. So let's go to the next question. What are 3 causes? You don't have to think of 3. I mean, you can just think of 1 if you want, but what's a cause that you would give money to? Just gonna keep an eye on the time here. What's a cause that you would give money to? And then finally, what annoys you that you wish would be fixed? I guess we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but if there's something like every day, day to day in your day-to-day life that just annoys you, that you just wish you could fix it or somebody would fix it. Okay, so I'm just looking at the chat. So somebody says, doing research, developing model public health program, disseminate the findings. So that sounds like kind of getting research out into the public, if I'm right, is annoying. Amanda asks if it's too early to drop the C word. I don't think so. That's definitely, yeah, a big problem or something that I wish could be fixed for sure. By the way, I'm assuming the C word is cancer. Oh, coronavirus. Why was I thinking cancer? Coronavirus, yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a lot more obvious than cancer even right now. Coronavirus is definitely annoying. Okay. So those are three things. I'm gonna kind of leave that for now. The one other thing that I'll just mention quick, because I think it's important, is I think it's worth thinking through when you're thinking about your purpose. It's worth thinking through what you believe to be true about the world too. And I think the reason I say this is that often we live in kind of, I'm gonna sound like a humanities person here, but we live in kind of constructs, and our identity like is created in this construct. And often when we think about the things that we believe to be true about the world, it could be, for example, if you hate capitalism, that's a really good indication that you shouldn't like go and work for a hedge fund. That seems like a really obvious example. But there are some things like that like your political affiliation or just things you believe about people, or even like a religion, or there are different things that kind of orient our view of the world and the way we think about purpose. And we kind of live within these kind of constructs of our identity. So it's worth like stopping and thinking through what you believe to be true about the world as well. But anyways, I'll leave those with you. Those are 3 questions you can ask to find your purpose. Hopefully you've, I think you got a starting point here, but hopefully you can kind of go away and think about them. And I think where we're at now, and I'm going to keep going, is that the path is what comes between passion and purpose. So now hopefully I've thrown a lot of P words at you. Hopefully you sort of have a better idea of what I mean now by both your passion and your purpose. And when we start with passion and purpose, you can actually start to approach a career based on your values. And I mean, this like 2-minute session is not enough time to give it. I would really challenge you, and this is really the inner work that's really valuable to do, is go away and spend a morning thinking about this and do the kind of the same thing, like write down the things you're passionate about, write down the things, the kind of outcomes you want to have in the world. And then the career and the path is actually the hardest part, to be honest. But when you've searched, at least when you've started with your passion and purpose, you have a sense of where you should go. Because let's be honest, so like I said at the beginning, I mean, when I started looking at jobs, I was just looking everywhere, anywhere that I could. I'd read every job posting, and if it even remotely sounded like what I wanted to do, I would apply for it. And the actual better way to do it now, when you think about this passion and purpose, is you think about the things you're good at, and some of that might go into the job posting, or into your application. But when you actually think about the outcome you want to have, it can actually help you to narrow down where you actually want to go, and it actually helps you start to get some direction. So your path is the map, the line that you will draw between your passion and your purpose, the things you love to do, the outcome you want to have. The path is the how are you going to do it. And I want to tell you that when you think through things this way, it can really transform your approach to a career. So I want to tell you a story. I know a PhD graduate, and she had done kind of a sciencey degree. I forget exactly what the degree was, and she was unemployed after working in academia. And she went, and I think she was working in like a fairly like poor neighborhood nearby. She was working with kids in a poor neighborhood, and she had this idea one day, and she was looking at these kids, and they were in a low-income neighborhood in the States. She thought, like, these kids just don't stand a chance, really. Like, they're just, after school, they're getting into trouble. They're doing all sorts of things they shouldn't be doing. And kind of, it's just setting them up for failure before they even start. And she looked at her own story, and she thought, what was so transformational about my story? And she thought the thing that changed my life, her life, the thing that changed her life was actually discovering research and getting into actually doing science and doing experiments. And she went away and she created this nonprofit. And basically, the nonprofit creates space for kids to come after school and do research. It, like, they just come after school and they do research. And for these kids in this low-income neighborhood, it's a chance to actually, obviously, like, not to be involved in other things that could be bad, but it also just helps them to get excited about them and helps them to learn something. And this is, again, in the US, I'm in Canada, but in the US, and in her particular, she was talking about school districts, and I don't completely understand the American school system, but there's obviously a lot of funding differences. And this was a district that didn't really even have funding to do science. And she went and she found funders to fund this nonprofit she created. And this is the organization she created. It's just it's so amazing. And it's such a neat way to bring, again, talking about path as being the bridge between your passion and purpose. Her passion was science, was research. Her purpose was, she really wanted to do something with helping those kids. And the path became creating a science nonprofit that taught them, like, research. It's just the coolest thing. I think it's really one of the neatest stories. And another one that happened just recently, actually, a friend of mine, she had done her PhD studying what happens when kids, what it does to kids when they move to a new house. So if you move, from one place to another place, to a new city or something, she actually researched this for her dissertation. And then she left academia. She was doing some consulting, and she realized that actually there could still be a demand for her to take her research, which had only really ever been in academic journals and things like that, and to go and actually help parents to navigate through the realities of moving with a kid. And I don't know if any of you are parents. I'm a parent. It's something, like, I would definitely consider. We moved with our kids, and I wished I had had a service like that, to just have somebody come and talk to us and say, here's what it's going to do to your kids. Here's what you need to think through. So she actually launched a consultancy using her PhD research about moving to a new home with a kid. And she launched a consultancy to help families do that. And in that case, her research, the passion is her research for her research on, like, moving locations. The purpose, the outcome, is actually helping families to go through that. And she's creating a positive environment, positive outcome for families. So I don't know what your path is going to look like. I don't know what it's going to be for you that starts to bridge that gap between your passion and purpose. But here are just a couple ideas about it. But I just want to encourage you that when you can actually find it, and you don't have one path. I don't think about it like this, but when you can find a career that actually starts to bring these things together and actually fits with kind of the core of the things you love doing and the things you want to accomplish in this world, it really can transform your life. And I think the other thing I want to say is start searching, because a lot of students wait. I waited. I was in denial throughout my academic career that it was ever going to come to an end, and it will. Whether you have 5 more years left in your program, I'm just realizing that I don't know offhand how long Australian PhDs are. Here, my PhD program was about 5 years. It took some people 10. So, no matter how much time you have left in your program, it's still going to come to an end. So don't wait. That would be, like, my other really big advice, is start searching now. And just from the comments, I know somebody already was saying that they have been searching. So start to think about this now, actually finding a path that could work for you. So a couple ways to think through finding your path. So you can research on LinkedIn, and I'm going to talk about that more in the second hour. I'm going to talk about building a network, but you can go and you can find people who are doing similar work. You can talk to your profs. Profs are just a fantastic source of this kind of information. I'll talk more about that later too, but it's a really great place to start. Shadow your profs. The university is an ecosystem, and a lot of profs are working outside, they're consulting, they're testifying before like parliamentary committees and things like that. So find some profs doing interesting things and just kind of talk to them about what they do. Profs have companies. Some profs are running companies on the side. So that's a really great place to start, is to start looking within the university at the type of kind of networks you can build either in the university, because there are of course research opportunities both in universities and in hospitals, but just more generically try to look at like who you know and what you can learn from them. You could think of job shadowing, you could think of placement. Really, there are a lot of different ways you can think about going about finding a path, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So once you've kind of thought through forming a path, I want to talk about creating a vision. And I think the best way to think about vision is your passion, your purpose, and your path, those 3 Ps, add time to it. So just to give you an example here. So if your passion is bench research, your purpose is detecting cancer earlier, the other C word, and your path is maybe you're going to go do product development for a biotech company. The vision comes in when you add time to the equation. So that's what you're going to do today. That's what you're going to do this year. But where are you going to be 10 years from now? And this, again, like coming back to my complaints about careers, and I have way too many, but we don't really think through this kind of 10-year time frame, or 5 years even. Like, where are you going long term? Where do you want to end up? Because if you don't know where you're going, you're definitely not, maybe you'll like where you get to, I don't know, but you don't really know. So when you can add this time frame and say, okay, here's my passion, my path, my purpose for right now. Here's where I'm going to start in product development for a biotech company in this case. But in 10 years, I want to be the CEO of a successful biotech company that pioneers early cancer detection. And when you look at this, you can actually see how in 10 years out, this is actually what can happen when you kind of follow this passion, purpose, and you create a path. Over time, this turns into your vision. So you can do this for all sorts of different areas of your life. So for example, if your passion is painting, this is not necessarily even career related, but if your passion is painting, even if you love to do it as a hobby, your purpose, say it's building community. You love your community and you want to build it. You could start a community painting group in your spare time. That would be your passion and your purpose, and your path would be the community painting group. And your vision could be that in 10 years time, you're going to have a local studio that sells local artists' work. That could be a 10-year vision. You decide what is meaningful for you. But I want to challenge you to create a vision. So basically go and write down 5 to 10 of your long-term visions. And don't do this right now, but do it after. And go write down some of the things that you, as of today, and when you take stock of your passion and your purpose, the things that you would actually like to accomplish. You might say, I want to be a medical liaison officer for a big pharma company, or I want to live in a house by the sea. I get paid to travel for work. Some people just want to get paid to travel. So it's a great thing if you can get it when there's no pandemic on. I want to have the freedom to be at my kids' events. That might be a thing. So whatever this looks like, sit down and write down, I say like 5 to 10 of your like long-term, like 10-year visions. Write down where you want to be in 10 years and be bold, think really big at this stage, because 10 years is actually, it'll go by fast, but it's enough time to do something pretty significant. So give yourself the time. And then again, I'm rushing really fast here, and I'm sorry, we're almost out of time for the first hour. So I'm rushing through creating a vision, but I really challenge you to go away and do this. And then once you create a vision, a big inspiring vision that in 10 years, I want to be a CEO of a biotech company. Once you create that 10-year vision, you can start to actually create a roadmap for how to get there. So you can actually sit down and you can say, okay, in year 1, I want to have accomplished, if I want to be the biotech CEO, by year 1, I want to have that product development experience. By year 2, I know that I need to be maybe taking some business courses on the side, whatever. You can kind of create a roadmap to actually get to that 10-year vision. And this is where, if you've ever heard of SMART goals, I didn't come up with this, it's well worth Googling it. You can actually set yourself goals along your timeline of getting to a vision. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And I'll show you what this looks like coming back to my little 10-year vision. So for example, if I have a 10-year vision to be a highly paid government foreign policy advisors, I might make a plan with SMART goals of actually how to get there. So for example, year 1, maybe my 10-year plan, I want to gain knowledge of the government processes with people in foreign policy role. I want to gain a security clearance because you probably need that. I want to start learning a language because maybe I need this language to do foreign policy. Year 2, you're going to gain some management experience. I'm going to apply for this recruitment program. So you can start to kind of create this path. And when you create the path and you use SMART goals, and I'll just leave that with you, you can go and look it up on your own. But when you create kind of goals that are actually time bound and specific and are going to help you accomplish things, you can actually create a way to get to your 10-year vision. So this is kind of a really quick overview of visioning. But as I said, visioning is super, super important. It's so vital to career building, and it's something that really we don't do enough. And I want to challenge you. It's not something that I ever did. I was never, I mean, some people are just like that. Maybe you're just one of those people that have had your life planned out to the nth degree. And maybe you actually need to go the other way and loosen up a little bit on your vision. Some people are like that. I was always the other way. I was just somebody, fly by the seat of my pants, see where I end up. And now that I actually sit and actually create visions in the long term, it's amazing the difference it makes in your life. And it's amazing the things you spend time doing that you actually realize that this either connects to where I want to be or it doesn't. And it really helps to give you clarity as you kind of progress. So my advice to you, and we're going to take a break right now, but I would just say, as you're starting with that, as you're starting to work through your passion, your path, your purpose, and ultimately creating a vision, go sit down for half a day or a day and kind of work some of these things through. Create a vision. I would say just write down like 5 to 10 things 10 years from now you want to be true about your life, and start to create a plan for how to get there. And that is basically the end of the first hour. I'll pause for any questions, but this is some of the thinking I've been doing around career building. And I really encourage you to be really intentional about this stuff. It will really make a difference in your career. And I know some of you are looking out into the world and you've got no idea where to go next. And it's hard to not feel like you just need to take any job you can get, and you might. I don't know what your life looks like. You might need to go work at Wendy's or something to make a paycheck. But in the scheme of things, in the much longer view, develop a vision for your life and start to chase it. And that's really going to change everything. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions? Then maybe we'll take like a 5-10 minute break and let you stretch your legs, because I know it's been a long time looking at a screen. So I'll just go to the chat and to the video. Any questions? I'll stop my share for a minute here. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna pause for a minute. I don't know if Sophia wants to jump in there, or else I can just call it and I can say everybody take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Hi everyone, so thanks so much for joining us again. I've just put on the screen the hashtag, so if you can please use UQMedHDR 2020 if you are mentioning this symposium on Twitter. Thanks.
Okay, so I think if everybody's ready to get going, again, hope I give you enough of a break. Just gonna share my screen again here. Okay, so I'm gonna go. Can everybody still hear me? I kind of took off my mic and put it back on. So does it still sound okay? Maybe somebody give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat really quick. All right. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about making your vision come alive. And in the last hour, I talked about creating a vision. It's obviously super important. And I'm not even in what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to do justice to the actual labor that it takes to make your vision come to life. And I mean, it's a lifelong thing. It's something that you're gonna spend a lot of time learning how to actually make your vision come to life. But if you start with a vision, as I kind of said in the last half, if you start with a vision, that's actually kind of half the battle. So I'm going to go through the second half. I think it's going to be a little bit shorter. I'm going to keep an eye on time because I'd like to have a little bit of time for questions or discussion after, if there's any. So let's get moving. So making your vision come to life. I talked a little bit about SMART goals. I would encourage you to take a note of SMART goals and go and look it up after. You can just Google it. You'll find lots of stuff on SMART goals. Goal setting is really important, and Professor Reeves, I don't know if that's what they call you, but Professor Reeves messaged and said really correctly that it's one thing to actually have the vision, but it's actually vital to actually have a plan to get there and actually lay out the action plan and the plan of attack, as it were, to actually get to your vision. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I'm really going to focus actually in this half on networking, which is a really big part of making your vision come to life. But let's talk a little bit about making your vision come alive. So what needs to be true for you to create your vision? Once you kind of create that world that you want to see, that 10-year plan, the 10-year you, whatever that looks like in 10 years, whether you want to be retired on an island or whether you want to be riding an elevator in a glass tower somewhere, it doesn't matter. It's your vision. You get to create it. But one thing that we need to do when we're creating visions and trying to achieve a vision is actually to look at what needs to be true of you to create your vision. So how do you become the type of person that can bring your vision to life? And if your vision 10 years out is, I'm going to stick with the CEO example, not to say, I mean, everybody has different visions, but if your vision is to be a CEO, there's a reason why you might not be able to go do it tomorrow. Maybe you can, I don't know. But there's a reason why it might take you 10 years to get there. And that's because the things that will be true of you when you are a CEO in 10 years are not necessarily true of you right now. So you need to make kind of a concerted effort to recognize the type of person you need to become to be that CEO, or to be whatever, to be the person lying on an island, maybe collecting money from somewhere else. Whatever that vision looks like, you need to create the plan to get there. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, but let me say the one thing I think it always takes is inner work. It always takes, I mean, one of the reasons why I've gotten really into like a lot of motivational speakers and stuff, and I know if you want to judge me for it, that's okay. But I've really found, even in my own life and my own career, that I brought a lot of stories to my career, say to the world of work when I worked in policy. I brought a lot of stories that I would tell myself things like, I'm not good enough. Everybody thinks I'm a joke. I have a PhD in religious studies. Who the heck is going to take that seriously? And there was inner work that I had to do there to actually learn to like myself and to actually accept myself and my degree and my skill set and just kind of be okay with it. That takes a lot of inner work. And that's a really big thing. And it's something that's ongoing. I really believe it. It's something that probably needs work every day if you want to make your visions come to life. It's also the thing I'm not really going to talk about right now. So I do encourage you to kind of create a plan for developing your inner self and your personal kind of your psychology to become the person that you want to be and to make your visions happen. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk more about outer work. And I want to talk a little bit about something I'm thinking through as being called performing leadership. So your leadership, sorry, just me. When people look at you and when you go to make your vision a reality, especially if it's like a public facing vision, and if you want to, get a high paying job or start a company or lead a company or, manage a division or build new products or whatever, there are things that influence your perceived value, the way that people look at you and the way that you are perceived in the marketplace, rightly or wrongly. There are things that influence the way people perceive you. And I mean, some of those things are things that you can't help, things about yourself that you can't change. We're not going to talk about that because that's a whole different conversation. But there are things that you can do when you look at the things you want to accomplish in this world, when you look at the vision you have, there are things that you can do, each of which is kind of a building block towards you creating your vision. And this could be things like your skills. So you have a basket of skills. And all of you in this program are developing new skills and new competencies. And there are things that you can do that you bring to the marketplace and that you will bring to the world. And your brand is a part of it, believe it or not. I think a lot about personal branding. And I'm going to talk about LinkedIn in a minute. And the difference between two people, one of which has a really good LinkedIn profile with a great profile picture, and one of which doesn't have any info on there and maybe doesn't even have a picture, like those two people will have a different experience in the marketplace, not because one is necessarily better than the other, but because one has built a better personal brand. And just, I mean, for better or for worse, personal branding is kind of here to stay. And not everybody likes it, but you can't really get around it, especially if you're starting your career. The way that people perceive your brand, and I don't mean, again, you're not like, this is not your personal Nike, you're not a Fortune 500 company, but just the way you present yourself, both online or offline, but now is becoming increasingly more about being online. Your social proof affects your perceived value. So this could be things like employers who will vouch for you. Maybe once you have professors who will write you recommendation letters, that's social proof. So social proof is basically, if you're driving down the street and there are two burger joints and one of them has a line out the front and one of them doesn't have anybody there, you immediately think to yourself, the one with the line out the front is better. That's social proof. When you see that line to the restaurant, that tells you that that's a good restaurant because people want it. And it's kind of the same thing with our careers, that often when we have people giving us recommendations, when we have a body of work we can show as you're creating work, you're creating maybe like a portfolio, these things can kind of lend themselves to social proof. Your network really influences your value, and it influences your ability to create your vision, which I'll talk about in a second. Communication abilities even are big. So it's something that I think just about everybody could work on improving their communication abilities, no matter where you're at. The ability to speak, the ability to express yourself, the ability to think critically. I say a lot when I speak. I don't know if you've noticed, but that's something I'm still working on, because every little thing you can do to improve your communication abilities will really help you a lot. And your qualifications, of course. I kind of talked about skills, qualifications. When you get, certain letters after your name, whatever those letters are, those mean something in the marketplace and they open doors. So all of these things are factors that influence your perceived value. And I'm not talking about your actual value. That's where the inner work comes in, because you're valuable by yourself. You're valuable for very different reasons than all of these things. But unfortunately, when it comes to creating a career, we really do need to recognize that the things people see are going to affect our ability to create a vision. And I think that's helped me recognizing that it's not about people. Sometimes you want people to know like who I really am, or you don't want people to know who you really are. That's not really the point for me. The point is that who do people need to see in order for me to be able to create my vision and to be able to create the world that I want to see. And each of these little things that you can put into place, I mean, you can't necessarily get a qualification in a day. Your degree is going to take you years. But you can literally change your brand in like an afternoon. And you could say, update your LinkedIn profile, and that gives your brand a boost. And all of a sudden, you get a little more, you appear to be, again, I'm being very careful, you appear to be a little more valuable to employers who are looking at you. So this is where there are a lot of little things that you can do, and a lot of little kind of levers you can pull, and each of those things works together to create the way that you kind of engage with the marketplace. And again, it's about making your vision come to life. So I want to, there we go. I want to talk about networking. And I've become really like obsessed with networking, I think, because I sent out hundreds and hundreds of resumes. I got no responses. I'm not saying you shouldn't send out resumes, of course you should, but I really do believe that networking is the fundamental career building thing. And it's not just fundamental to career building, it's fundamental as you go through life. In my case, for example, I run a company. Networking is how I get opportunities. It's probably how I got the speaking gig, maybe, I don't remember. Oh no, I think you guys came to me. But networking is often how, like when I do consulting work, that comes through networking. As you go through your life, your network is the people who help you achieve your vision, really, and not because you're using people, because you're working together to achieve the same types of things in the world. So you see this in the academy all the time. You see professors working together. When two professors work together on say to create an edited volume, collection of essays or something, that's literally networking, working towards both of their vision. So networking is actually really cool. And I want to talk a bit about it. And first of all, I want to tell you what I know you're probably thinking, because this is what people think about networking. People assume that networking is slimy. People assume that networking is using people. People assume that networking is like transactional, that you're only interested in somebody based on like what they can give you back. To say that networking is awkward, kind of you're going to sit there looking at the floor. And just for a bit of background, when I say networking, I usually mean like a one-on-one conversation with somebody that you're trying to learn from each other. That's what I think of as primarily, that's the best way you can do networking. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Or networking is only for well-connected people. Some people think that networking is for people who are already really well-connected, you know, daddy's golf buddies or whatever, something like that. All of these things are, I would say all of these things are wrong, but if networking done badly does have elements of each of these in it. Networking done badly can feel transactional. Unfortunately, I felt that before. But at its best, I want to tell you that networking is actually a really beautiful thing. And I like to think of networking as being fundamentally creating a connection with another human being and trying to understand who they are, what makes them tick, what kind of makes them come alive, what their visions are, thinking like in that big picture kind of thing. And it's actually about creating a connection. And it's in that way, it's about a lot more than getting a job. So why do we network? I kind of think of three ways. So first of all, you network to build your social capital. So social capital, it's another kind of social sciencey term, but your social capital is kind of the way that your relationships can actually create change and create value in the world for you. And just like the example I gave of those professors who maybe know each other and work together, say on a grant application, that could be kind of considered social capital in a way. Social capital is when, you know, somebody wants to hire me for a consulting gig, if they know who I am and know my work, that's kind of social capital. So social capital is the kind of value that comes out of network. I think that for a lot of you right now, career exploration is probably the top reason you want to network. And this is why you need to network before you get out of academia, because you can't just start like a month after your PhD ends and you graduate and you desperately need a job today, and all of a sudden you're going to start networking. And it's going to take a few months to actually network, build your network, especially if you have, it depends on what the job market looks like, it depends on what your skill set is. I mean, certain skill sets, you're just going to be fine and you're going to sail into your first job. But for some people like me, it's not always that easy. And the reason I say like me is because I had a degree that wasn't in high demand. So it was networking that opened the doors so that I could actually find a career that kind of fit. So career exploration is really important. Start now, start tomorrow, start this week. I'm going to tell you how to do it. But start exploring, start networking not because you want a job tomorrow necessarily, but because you want to know what's out there. And once you know what's out there, you can come back to, again, kind of creating your vision and figuring out where you want to go once you know what's out there. And when you sit down with somebody, and often this happened to me, I'd sit down with somebody and say, I want to be where you are in 10 years. Or the flip side, there's no way I want to be where you are in 10 years. So I know I need to make some different decisions from what you made. So career exploration, finally tapping the hidden job market. So when it comes time to get a job, something like 80% of jobs are not advertised. I don't know if you knew that. I'm assuming it's true in Australia, it's true here in Canada, it's true in the US as well. 80% of jobs are not advertised. And that means that jobs go to networks all the time. And I mean, you can have a discussion about whether this is fair or not, totally different discussion. But all I'm saying for right now is it's just the reality. It's just the way the world works. And the best way that you can access this hidden job market is through building a network. Because what happens when an employer is looking to hire somebody, the first thing they ask themselves is, do I know somebody? They'll often ask employees, do you know somebody? They'll sometimes ask another, a friend who runs a similar company, say, do you know somebody? And after they go through all those steps, then they will go out and put a job posting out. It depends a little bit. Some bigger companies have more structured HR processes. So there's no like one size fits all way that this works. But a lot of small companies hire this way. And really, the way that they hire you is because they know you. And the flip side is companies often have money to play around with. And when you get on their radar, they may not, maybe they weren't about to go and post a job posting for a certain job. Sometimes when companies meet you and they say, hey, we've got an extra like 100 grand lying around this year, why don't we take 85 of it or 95 of it or whatever and hire that person to come and do this for us. So companies will often create roles too once you know people and once you kind of build a rapport with them. So this is all the kind of stuff that comes from networking. But why don't people network? I think the answer is probably pretty obvious. I think people don't network because they're afraid. There's a fear. There's a fear that people won't like me, a fear that, excuse me, people will think I'm using them. I fear that our meeting will be awkward, or there will be huge lapses in conversations. There's a fear that I have nothing to offer. Sometimes, I know I said it's not transactional, but sometimes we feel like it is, and like, why would somebody want to talk to me? There's sometimes a fear that I'll reach out and they won't respond, that somebody will laugh at me is the worst case scenario. I even felt this when I was starting my networking. That's a sign that I was in a bad place, because I was actually thinking people were just going to laugh me out of the room because I had a PhD in religious studies. So that's a bad place, and that's not true. It's actually not how networking works at all. And I'm not going to take all of these, and I can't really, I mean, fear is fear, and we are all going to face fear at different times, and a lot of fear from networking could come from all these different places. But let me just point to a few really quick things. So fear that people will think I'm using them. I know that's a common one, but actually we all do this. Like, the higher you get in a career, when you're networking with somebody who's further ahead in a career, they just know how this works. They know how the game works. I know how networking works now even. I didn't, a couple of years ago when I was leaving academia. I just know how networking works. And when somebody wants to have a call with me, I know what it's about. And I know if I have the time to take it and have a conversation with them or not. I know that if somebody, I know when somebody wants to sell me something, I know when somebody wants to get hired, I know when somebody wants to ask me for advice. I can kind of sense that because I've been around the block a little bit. And I don't ever think people are using me. I completely understand the way the game works. Maybe game is a bad way to say it, but I understand how it works and I'm okay with it. I want to help people. And that's the other thing about coming down to that bottom one, that I have nothing to offer. Not bottom, closer to the bottom. I have nothing to offer. And the reality is you do have something to offer. The reality is that no matter who you are, you might offer a great conversation. You might offer good questions. You might give them a chance to reflect on their own career and where they've gone, but you do have something to offer. And then finally, I'll just say, reach out, that I'll reach out and they won't respond. This does happen sometimes. I'll show you a little bit how I do networking. One of the ways I do is with LinkedIn. Sometimes people don't respond. You send out a connection, they don't respond. And it's easy to get in your head and to think this means it's because they don't like me, it's because I'm a failure, it's because I'm a joke. I don't know, maybe your voices in your head are kinder than mine. My voices were not very kind to me in my head when I was starting out networking. Hopefully yours are a little bit nicer. But again, like, the reality is you just don't know where people are at, and people may not use LinkedIn. People may just not have the time. When I was really busy running projects for a while, people would reach out to me and I couldn't even think about it, because at the end of the day, all I wanted to do was go home and flop into bed and spend a bit of time with my kids, because we go through seasons of life like that. So I'll talk to you in a minute about reaching out, but I'll say reach out to people you want to reach out to and don't feel bad about it. And in terms of managing fear, create a plan to actually manage your fear. So I just a couple suggestions. You could write down 3 things you have to offer that makes you a great catch. So again, I talked about a few of these, but this could be your people skills. It could be your conversation. It could be that you've traveled and you have a lot of great stories about the world. Whatever it is, doesn't really matter, but there's something about you that a networking contact is going to love having a conversation with you. I like to say, when you're going through, especially when you start to get into the phase of really actively networking your way into a job, it can be really hard on you. So I would say plan some realistic activities you can build into your day that will increase confidence. This could be listening to music, could be exercising, could be journaling. And finally, come up with a plan for actually dealing with defeat and discouragements when they come, because they will come. So one more thing I want to say, I want to redefine networking for you here. So I don't know what you thought about it before, but the old definition of networking, the way that maybe you, or definitely I used to think about it, networking is awkwardly standing in a room full of strangers who don't want to be there, looking at my feet, paying way too much attention to the cheese on the cheese plate, and having nothing to say. And the new definition, this is what I would suggest to you. Networking is forming a meaningful human connection that will help me and the other person to get vision, encouragement, and career direction. It will provide opportunities for advancement and put me in the running for jobs I didn't even know existed. Everybody with a great career networks. Now, if you want to steal my new definition, you're totally welcome to. Put it somewhere you can see it. Write yourself a positive definition of networking, because networking will actually be the thing that changes your career. And even if you do have one of those degrees that's in high demand, trust me, networking is going to be the thing that opens up doors, not just to get the first job you want, but to actually look, to actually go and achieve your vision. Networking is really powerful for doing that. So where do you start? I want to give you some really actionable advice. So hopefully you can follow along. And if you have a minute, and if you're on a computer, I guess it probably wouldn't work on a phone, but open LinkedIn. Maybe it'll work on a phone. I don't know. Open LinkedIn, and I'm going to walk you through finding some people on LinkedIn. Hopefully you have a LinkedIn account. If not, you'll kind of just have to listen. And unfortunately, I actually can't do this because of some privacy concerns. So I'm going to have to tell you what to do. But anyways, open LinkedIn. But I want to talk about drawing people in before reaching out. Building an irresistible personal brand. And I don't have enough time to get into full branding, but I just want to say really quickly 4 kind of things to do, and I'll show you what to do with your LinkedIn profile in a second. So I like to say present yourself as professional, interesting, useful, and friendly. Professional, and I'm specifically thinking on LinkedIn here, which I'll talk about more. So professional, as you're stepping into the workplace, you are stepping into a professional environment. And professional doesn't necessarily mean that you need to look like a stock photo of whatever your, whatever your gender, whatever your identity is. Like, I'm not saying you need to look like a stock photo of what you would look like. But I am saying it's important to cultivate a certain image. I think especially with LinkedIn, the photo is important. Find a way to convey that you're professional in what you do. Interesting, I think interesting is underrated. And I think all of you, by virtue of studying cool things, are all interesting. So find ways to get this through onto your say LinkedIn profile. Useful, this is really important. And I'm going to show you what all this looks like in a minute. So stay with me. But being useful is something that, again, in the marketplace, not all our skills are valued equally in the marketplace. It's not up to employers to necessarily put together the picture of how you're going to be useful to them. It's really on us as job seekers. It's incumbent on us to actually think through where we fit, the value we bring to a company, and to actually understand that. So in your LinkedIn profile, it's really important that when somebody looks at it, they don't just get, one thing I see PhD students do a lot, I'll use this example. PhD students talk a lot about their own research in a LinkedIn profile, and that can have a place. But if an employer wants to hire you, they don't just want to know about the research you did. They want to know about they want to know about what problem you solved for them. So maybe it's that they need somebody who can run a lab, and maybe you can do that. So then you want to stress in your LinkedIn that you have already run, you've run a lab, or you have, supervised people, or you have, budgeted, and you've ordered the equipment and kept up a kind of inventory. And those are the types of things, when I think of useful, that employers can actually put together and say, like, yeah, that's something I need. I need somebody who can do that. That solves a problem for me. And that's going to be, you're going to be a lot more likely to get hired. Finally, I'm not going to put too much of a fine point on this because, personality is personality. I'm maybe a little more outgoing and bubbly than some people are, but friendliness really goes a long way. And especially, again, on LinkedIn, if you're reaching out to people, connecting with people, if you can find ways to just be friendly to people, because people just, we're humans. We're just looking to form relationships. And just like when you go to the grocery store and you smile at somebody, sometimes digitally on LinkedIn, a smile on LinkedIn might be the equivalent of that, might be like sending somebody a nice message when they connect with you and saying, hey, thanks for connecting. Your work looks interesting, or something. So to kind of think through these 4 things, I'm going to talk about how to actually create a LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to go down these pretty quickly. Feel free to take a screenshot of that if you want. I can send the slides after. I think you're going to have a video too. That's, as far as I know, the video will be available after too. But so create a LinkedIn profile that attracts people. So how do you do this? First of all, the photo is really vital. So if you open your LinkedIn right now, feel free to do it as you're listening. What does your photo look like? Is it a professional picture of you and ideally smiling? Again, I know it's controversial, but I think just smiling goes a long way. And you don't need professional headshots. When I say professional picture, you don't need to drop $500 in headshots. You can just take your phone, go stand out in front of a wall, kind of in some decent light, do a selfie, excuse me, look at the camera, you'll get something half decent. Pick a headline that says what you want to do. So one thing I see students doing a lot is they'll put PhD student as a headline or MPhil student as the headline. Excuse me. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I would encourage you to add a few extra words to your LinkedIn headline, because remember, when most people look, they're looking, especially if they look on a phone, all they're going to see is your picture and your headline first. So your headline might say like creative researcher, might say grant writer, might say program manager. You can pick some words that are like fitting where you want to go in your career and the type of work that you want to do, and feel free to put those into your headline. So it can be aspirational. It doesn't have to be like your current job. Your headline could be, when I was wanting to be a policy analyst, I called myself a policy analyst even before I got hired as a policy analyst, because it was the work I wanted to do. So I understood that I was potentially a policy analyst. I actually did have the skill set to do it. I just didn't have a policy analyst job yet. So I would say pick a few words in your headline, and remember that when recruiters or when employers search for people, they're not searching for PhD students. So I would never sit down and be like, I need a PhD student. I would say, I need a graphic designer, I need a grant writer, I need a research consultant, I need whatever. So try to think through like what people are actually going to look for on LinkedIn. That's important. I'm going really quick here. Bear with me. So try to write an easy to read career story in your about section. So I think all that I would say about the about section is a lot of PhDs just get bogged down, and sorry, MPhils too. A lot of advanced degree students get bogged down with the nitty gritty of their research in the about section on LinkedIn. I really love just telling, I love telling a story. I mean, there are different schools of thought on this, but again, what I just talked about is you want to kind of show that you're useful to an employer. So I love to say like, I love to say something like, since I was a little kid, I'd love to study grasshoppers. It's not a real thing for me, but it might be for you. That's why I did a PhD in grasshopper biology, DNA or something. And that's the kind of spirit of discovery that I bring to everything I do. And I want to do research projects. I want to lead research projects that are going to help us discover advances in DNA or something. I'm reaching a little bit here, and you can probably tell I'm not a scientist. Sometimes my science examples get a little out there. But the point is again, if you're thinking through that useful thing, you want throughout your whole LinkedIn profile, it's like a resume. You want an employer to look at it and say, I want to hire them. It's not like your Facebook page that people just want to know about you. They actually want to know if you can do a job, and that's really important. I use it a little bit differently, so don't use my LinkedIn as an example because I'm not looking for jobs anymore. But if you're job hunting, it gets a little bit different. One thing I'll say too, I have guides for LinkedIn on Roostervein, the website, so feel free to go check it out there, and you can walk through it too. Fill in the experience section with your work. If you've done some work, feel free to be creative about your own experience. If you say you've worked in a lab as part of your degree, you can say, worked in a lab. You can say as a teaching assistant, a research assistant, whatever your title is, put that in as your work, and add some projects and links. So I'm going to keep going here because I'm losing time, but let's talk about networking, building a network. So I talked about LinkedIn, reaching out. Let's talk about, you already have a network. And this is where you start. Before you start reaching out to strangers on LinkedIn that I'll talk about in a minute, you already have a network. Your network could include your family, it could include friends, it could include university friends. I mean, all of you right now are a sort of a network. You all know each other. And in 5 years, you will all be in very different places, doing very different things. And if you keep those connections, that will be a pretty powerful network if you stop and think about it. Network with your profs. Man, profs are so well connected. I didn't really realize this. It wasn't as true in the humanities, but when I was in Ottawa, I would meet profs all the time who consult with the government, profs who have their own companies, profs who are leading research projects together with government departments or think tanks or whatever. So do talk to your profs and work with your profs. And they're one of the easiest points of entry for you if you build those relationships with them to a life outside of the academy. So don't be afraid to do that. So start with that network and reach out. And that network, I think, is made up of people who have their own knowledge that you need. So your profs, for example, might be able to tell you about consulting with your degree. They might be able to tell you about working with the government, but they can also probably have connections you need. They can probably introduce you to people doing really interesting things. And that's fantastic. I mean, if you can get a live introduction to somebody and then go and talk to that person and ask them questions about what they do, talk about that in a minute, that really is a fantastic way to start doing your career exploration. And I mean, when somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I mean, I try to say yes. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn after this if you want. But when somebody asks for my time, I try to give if I can. I can't always, unfortunately. I just have to be really honest about the amount of time I have in a day. When somebody asks for my time, but when somebody comes to me and says, "Can you talk to so and so for me?" I'd probably do it. Like or at least make a lot more effort to do it. So an introduction really does go a long way if you can get it. So try to get introductions from your profs or from people you know or whatever. But after that, after you've kind of looked at who you know and start with this existing network and reached out, and you can start doing that this week. Go start doing it. Start figuring out who you know, mapping out who you know. If you're not on LinkedIn or you're not using LinkedIn much, you can start adding them to LinkedIn. That's a great place to start. Not everybody uses LinkedIn all the time. That's fine. But once you start adding people, it'll show you suggested people, and you're going to see like, hey, my prof knows somebody over there. It's just like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. It suggests other people for you to connect with. So do get on LinkedIn and start adding the people you know, but don't be afraid to grow your network intentionally. And if you have your LinkedIn open, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but you can actually choose, and I love LinkedIn. I do talk about it a lot. I mean, it's not the only place. If there's a company you want to work at, I'd encourage you to go and email somebody there if they don't have LinkedIn. Like, find ways to connect to people, but LinkedIn really is a gift. And I would say like 80 to 90% of employees are probably going to be on LinkedIn. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's pretty huge. Even if they're not active, you can at least find them there, and then you can kind of find them offline. So you can be strategic. You can say like, I've always wanted to work for Google. Who do I know that works for Google? And go to LinkedIn and go and see if you have that connection. So you can kind of connect in two ways on LinkedIn. You can send somebody an in-mail message, which comes with LinkedIn Premium. You don't have to. I usually just like to do the second thing here, which is to send somebody kind of a connection request, and I'll include a little note that says something. I'll show you what that looks like. So what do you say? I usually, when I'm connecting to somebody, I say, "Hi, so-and-so. I studied under Professor so-and-so. She suggested that I reach out to you. I'm hoping we can connect. You're doing some really interesting things. The example initiative looks great." I like to do this. If there's something that there's something they're working on you think is interesting, you can say it looks great. Thanks, your name. That's it. This is one I won't read. It's a little bit longer, but it's roughly the same idea. So how do you find people on LinkedIn? Let's do this really quick. Still okay for time. Open up your LinkedIn. And if you have it open, I want you to start by going up to the search bar on top. I'm assuming you're all doing this. I don't have any way to tell, but go to the search bar and in the search bar, I want you to type in a skill set that you have. If you're on LinkedIn, type in a skill set that you have. So let's say grant writing was the skill set that you have. Type it into the search bar, but instead of searching for jobs, I want you to search for people when it drops down. So you can search for people. And when you search for people, you're going to find a whole bunch of people who are in careers who are using that skill of grant writer. They have it in their profile. And I love to do this to find possible career paths. So if you're like, what the heck can I do with this degree? Take some of your skills that you have, your lab work, your project management, whatever, type it into LinkedIn, and it will literally tell you the people who are doing that kind of work. And you can start writing them down, and you can have a list of job titles you could be aiming for. And it could be like, okay, I know that I can go be, with my skill of grant writing, I know I could be a project manager. I know I could be a research director. I know I could be a lab manager. You can start to kind of fill in the different kinds of things you could do. Maybe a consultant. There's probably grant writing consultants. There are grant writing consultants. So that search bar and just starting there can be a really great place to start. So if you're still following, if you're on your LinkedIn profile, especially if you're on a computer, again, I'm sorry I can't show you this. This just, I'd have to use my LinkedIn to do it, and then you kind of see everybody. And anyways, it's just some privacy things. So you can go to your connections. You can click the connections button on LinkedIn, and that will actually give you suggested connections too. So that's another great place to find people. One place I really love to find people on LinkedIn is groups. So if you join LinkedIn groups, and there's actually a great one, it's called PhD Career Networking, I think. It's run by a friend of mine. His name's Parag. And there's like 5,000 people in that group. There's a Rooster Bane group too. Feel free to join it. I just haven't been really good at getting it moving. LinkedIn is kind of tricky, and LinkedIn groups are really tough. So I mean, join both. Feel free. You're welcome. But I'm admitting that he does a way better job managing his group than I do. And there's so many cool people. When you go to groups, go and look at who's in the group, and you can reach out to people. You could say, hey, like, I see that it's all people in careers, I should say. It's people like 5-10 years down the road from where you are right now, and you can go and reach out to them. And if they're in the PhD to careers group, it's because they want to talk about PhD careers, and a lot of people do. So I don't know what one would be for MPhil, but like, have a look. I'm sure there are master's degree groups, or you can just, there are specific ones for your kind of discipline. So there are probably like, you know, certain kind of medicine or whatever. Go find groups that you can join, and once you get into them, you can message the members and you can connect with them. Another really great way that I like to find people on LinkedIn is by going through company pages. So for example, if I wanted to meet somebody who worked at Shopify, Shopify is in Ottawa here. It's like Canada's biggest company, and by market cap, I think it is. If I wanted to go find somebody who works at Shopify, I could go to the Shopify page. So on your LinkedIn, you can pick a company that you think is interesting. Maybe it's a Google or a Microsoft, or maybe it's like a, I don't know, a pharma company or whatever. Go to their company LinkedIn page, and on that page, you will see a list. You can actually click on the People tab on the left-hand side. And when you click on that People tab, it will show you the people who work there. And when you do that, you can actually see who you should connect to. And you might even find you share some connections. So it's a really great way if you're exploring a new industry to actually go on the company pages, see who works there, try to make connections. And that's a really fantastic way to start to get into LinkedIn networking. You can look at articles, who's sharing articles that are interesting, comment. You can follow people who are sharing articles, and you can follow people on LinkedIn. So I'm going to keep going. I'm sorry I'm going pretty quick here, but hopefully this gives you some things to think about. Hopefully you're able to follow some of these, and then you can go away and do some of these things on your own. So a few more LinkedIn tips. If you're too shy to reach out to somebody, you can always follow. It's a little less like, they don't have to say yes for you to follow them. You can just hit follow, and then you can see what they're doing and start to, you know, like or comment on their stuff or whatever. I would say connect intentionally. I don't just, like, when I'm creating my LinkedIn network, I don't do it as much anymore. But when I was starting out, I think like the temptation is just to connect to everybody, and there's something to that. But when they're actually people you want to connect to, make sure that you're actually likely to connect to them. So I like to send a connection request, and I like to send a little note that explains why I want to connect, because somebody can't put the pieces together, especially if you're changing industries. So if you're trying to break into a new industry, you don't know anybody there, and you see somebody who does a job you think is interesting, if you can say, hi, I'm a student, I'm currently here, but I'd like to learn more about what you do because I'd like to be where you are, that's going to help connect the dots for them. So do be intentional about your connection. And as I already said, ask for intros all the time if you can. If you know somebody on LinkedIn, you see that they know somebody you want to talk to, it's totally okay to say to that person, will you introduce me? That will make your networking efforts a little more productive. Other ways to meet people. Networking is just a skill. I mean, there's so many ways you can build a network, but meet people on other social media channels. You can meet people on Twitter, structured networking events, meet people at the park, meet people at the dog park, the gym, networking apps. I really like, I don't know if any of you have tried the app Shaper, and I'm not sure if it's big in Australia, but I've used it here in Ottawa, and I met a lot of really cool people when I was starting my career. It's kind of like Tinder for networking, like you swipe right, swipe left kind of thing. It's really cool. It's a really cool app, Shaper. Check it out if you've never checked it out. Lunch Club is also really neat. You sign up for it online, and they will send you a connection, and you have like lunch virtually, and you talk to them. So that's really cool too. One other one that I'll mention that's not there, it's called Smart Tribe, and Smart Tribe actively connects PhDs to people in industry. I think it's only for PhDs if I'm not mistaken, but do check it out anyways. Even if you're not a PhD, they might be a little wider, but I think it is PhDs. But Smart Tribe actually makes a connection for you. So all you do is sign up and they'll connect you to somebody in industry. It's a really, really brilliant thing. And it's a great way to get started on your networking. So go check that out, try it out. It's definitely amazing. Keep in mind a few more things about networking. First of all, be safe. You have the right, especially once the pandemic's done and you're starting to meet people in person. I guess this applies to the pandemic too in a different way, but be safe. All the normal rules apply if you're meeting a stranger. Just, you have the right to feel comfortable in a networking meeting. One thing, like for example, if you're not comfortable going out in the evening for a glass of wine, go out in the morning for a cup of coffee, and you can ask for that, you can insist on that. Whatever makes you feel the most comfortable, especially, as I say, if you're having an in-person meeting. I always would do that because I just, at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily for safety, but at the end of the day, I just hated like the whole happy hour thing, and I wanted to go home at the end of the working day once I was working. So I usually went for like early morning coffees. My brain was sharper. It's a good time to network anyways. Be mindful of time. So when you're talking to people, do be aware if you're sitting down with the CEO or somebody, somebody's very busy, they may not just have 2 hours to talk. So I like to ask, like, how much time do you have? And you can actually kind of say, okay, we have half an hour. And I know I want to ask you about like your 2, pieces of career advice for me or whatever. So that's really important to actually be aware of how much time you have. And be flexible too, be willing to kind of make it work. So you may really want to have a sit down meeting with somebody and they say, sorry, I could just do a 10-minute phone call. I mean, take it. If you can get it, take it, and kind of be flexible and kind of see where it goes. So a couple things, I'm getting close to the end here. I have these informational interview questions. These are actually on Roosterbane too. If you want to make a note, you can just find these questions, and I have a whole post that goes with it. But informational interviews are the kind of conversation you're going to have with this person, this networking contact, and you can ask them all of these questions. These are all great questions to ask. So what is your job like? Love it. How did you get into your position? Great question. What are the hardest or most discouraging parts of your work? Again, if you're thinking through some of this like job shadowing, job searching questions as you do your career exploration, what are the encouraging parts of your work? How would someone get into a position like yours? I really like to ask that question because a lot of times when you talk to people in companies, they actually know how to get there. When I went to work for the government, I'm doing a webinar. It's not relevant to any of you because you're not in Canada, but I'm doing a webinar on the Canadian government. I actually know how to get hired by the Canadian government because I worked there. So I know how the processes work. But you don't know that if you're outside. So that's where like having somebody on the inside, they'll tell you, like, make sure you send your resume to so-and-so and she'll do something with it, whatever. Where do you think your career might go next is kind of an interesting question. You can get a sense of career trajectory. Last, I'm going to stop here, but what advice would you have for somebody in my position? That can be a really great thing to ask, to kind of get advice if you're starting out your career. Actually, let me do the last 3. So can you give me a sense of what salaries might look like for someone like me in your industry? This is a great question because if you're going into a job and you have no idea if you should be asking for 60,000 or 90,000, there's a good chance you're going to get underpaid. So if you start doing networking, you realize that everybody in that starting salary that you're aiming for is making about $75,000. When the company comes and says, like, we're going to pay you 60, you can say, no, I want 75, or I want 80, and then they'll come to 75 or whatever. You can start to negotiate. So those are important things to know, actually. Who else should I talk to? I really like this question because this opens the door for another connection. Remember, I already said that it's really valuable to have an introduction. So when somebody can actually say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so at this company, and I'll make the introduction, fantastic. Finally, does your company hire consultants? If you want to do consulting, maybe you don't, but it can be a good way to find out how consultants get hired too. So let's keep going. I'm rushing a little bit and I apologize, but after the meeting, you can send a thank you note, ask for follow-up connections, and then just leave them alone, I think. So your networking is actually about creating your vision. It's about more than getting a job. And as you go, you'll see that networking is the way that you create your vision. And when you created that big, beautiful vision, the network, it's the people you're going to work with, the opportunities, the jobs, the people who are going to hire you, the people who are going to fund you if you want to start something. That's your network. Your network is going to be one of the biggest mechanisms for you being actually able to create your vision and to make it come to life. And that's valuable. So the thing I'll leave you with, I'm just about done, but build a big, beautiful vision, go create it. Build a path between your passion and your purpose, as I talked about with all my P's and all the alliteration. Find a career that fits you, explore. Don't forget to build that network like I just talked about, and go do some cool stuff with your degree, because ultimately the sky's the limit for what you can accomplish. I mean, human potential is just limitless. And if you're in an advanced degree, you are already an exceptionally talented person. And the attitude that you can approach the world with. I mean, some students go to the world with their hands out saying like, what can I possibly get? But if you can approach the world with understanding that you have some big vision, some things you want to create, and some work you want to do, and you just want to know how to get there, you might have to pay your dues for a little bit, but you know that I want to have this impact on the world. That's the best attitude to come to a career with, and that's going to make all the difference in your life and in your career. So I'm going to stop there. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to pause for a minute. And yeah, Sophia.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was such an informative presentation, and it was so interesting as well. I might just actually start a poll for everyone. I've just uploaded it now. You should be able to see it. If you could just answer how you would rate the quality of the session, and then how relevant the topic was for you. So we've got most people have voted.
Chris, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you posted recently on Twitter about how you see that LinkedIn is a much better platform for HDRs to be focusing on rather than Twitter. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who argue that Twitter is good for networking. I think it is. I mean, if you make a connection, it doesn't matter if it's on Twitter, if it's on LinkedIn, if it's on Facebook, if it's on I don't know. I just aging myself because I'm trying to think of TikTok. That's what I'm thinking of, TikTok. It doesn't matter if it's on TikTok. It doesn't matter where you meet somebody. But the bottom line is I see a lot of people who are working really hard to build Twitter followings and to build a brand on Twitter, and that can be valuable. For academics, it's becoming a really big thing because it's all about SciComms or communicating your research or whatever. But actually LinkedIn has a lot of opportunities. It's not really an academic platform though. So if you're trying to share your research, LinkedIn may or may not be the place to do it. I think if you're creative, you can use LinkedIn for that, but recognize that your audience is not necessarily going to be 5,000 people who are in your field, which happens a lot on Twitter. However, LinkedIn, yeah, when you build your LinkedIn, you build your following there, you're creating opportunities, it's funders, it's LinkedIn is a really good mix of job opportunities, but also people who want to fund things, and also employers people looking for consultants. And I don't know, I'm a little, I spend too much time on Twitter, and I should have spent more time on LinkedIn. But I really do think LinkedIn is a great place to be. And academic, it's not really a go-to for academics, but for a lot of people in industry, it is. So if that's where all the people in industry are, it makes sense to spend some time there, I think, and figure it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Chris? I had one question. I was just wondering sort of what your normal day, I guess, would look like in comparison to how you think it would have looked like if you'd stayed in academia. Oh
God, that's interesting. I mean, it's different now. Actually, my life right now looks very similar to what it looked like in academia. Especially because of the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, I mean, I work from home. When I do research, I'm doing it from home, just like I was before. When I was at the think tank, I had my life was very, very hectic, and it was quite a transition from academia, because all of a sudden I was having meetings with people all the time, and I was trying to run big budgets, and I was running around and managing staff and managing researchers, and like working with the communications department to develop communications plans. And so that was like my immersion, and it was a trial by fire really out of academia into like a high-paced, high-energy office environment. And I was creating big like conferences and roundtables and like all that sort of thing. So that was a very different environment. And then when I worked for the government, I literally like almost every day was the same. It was almost always like going to an office building in town, riding the elevator up, spending the day there, and then coming home at night. So that was like something else altogether. It wasn't really high paced. It was just, it's government. I don't know if anybody knows about working in government, but it's government's often a little bit slower paced. So it wasn't a rush. Nothing was hectic. There was lots of time to do anything. So I would say just that I've had a pretty eclectic mix since leaving academia. And I know from talking to other academics, other people who've left, there's a pretty wide range of possibilities. But it's a good question to ask too, as you have speakers throughout the week to see what kind of things people are doing. It's really interesting. But.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, we might end it there then if there's no other questions. Oh, we've got one from Sheena. So did you find that employers are hiring PhDs outside of their field? For example, having a science degree and applying at a business firm?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are certain limitations, obviously, if you don't have a certain skill set, but if you are trying to change fields, I would go back to networking. Networking is really what's going to open up those doors for you, because if somebody looks at you on paper, they might say, well, this person is a scientist. You're using the example of science trying to apply for business. But if you can go sit down with them and explain, the passion you have for business, maybe, and I don't know, maybe you're learning things on the side, maybe you have a plan for how you're going to learn more. I think networking will really help you like square that circle. So I would definitely go try to network if you're transitioning careers. And the other thing about LinkedIn is, coming back to the LinkedIn piece, is you can really intentionally cultivate a LinkedIn that is business related. So for example, you might start sharing interesting articles about business on your LinkedIn. So things about, I don't know, like if you're thinking of a science related business, but you might still be sharing articles about like business structure or marketing or whatever. But you can actually, by the tone you set on your LinkedIn and by the way you create your profile, if you say on your profile, you have a science degree and you're looking to move into business, you can actually fill in the blanks for people. So employers can kind of understand like, oh, they're making a career transition. It's totally legitimate, because I mean, this is a reality now. Like, we're all going to make 5 or 6 career transitions in our life. So there's nothing wrong with jumping into a new area. And it's good to actually be kind of strategic about it. Do recognize if there are skills you need to pick up. You can get to work acquiring those skills if you really know you want to go into business, and maybe you need to learn some accounting or something, do a course, or even like a course online. But yeah, don't be discouraged about making big transitions like that. It's totally possible. People do it all the time. So
awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you again for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. Just to say, feel free to connect, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you want to find me. I'm totally happy to connect and continue the conversation. So thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you. I'm just going to share, sorry. I'm just going to share the screen again that has the Twitter hashtag again for you all.
Oh, sure. Okay. And Lauren's pointing out that the link on the website goes to Facebook instead of LinkedIn. So thanks, Lauren. I'll have to check that. I know it was doing that before and I forgot to change it. Okay. Thank you again, everybody. I'm going to log off now, but take care. Enjoy the rest of your week. You've got a fantastic week lined up. So I really hope it goes well, and hopefully we'll carry on the conversation. So bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.